Welcome to Play PSVR 2, the podcast. Happy Father's Day, everybody. I'm your host, Adam. And although I have not sired any children, it doesn't mean that this next guy's mom still doesn't call me daddy. Welcome to the podcast, Alex. It is Play PSVR 2, the podcast. We have a ton to talk about. Are you ready? Do you have your talking pants on?
I have my talking pants on. I have my talking hat on, courtesy of some drawings my kids did that got turned into a hat for Father's Day. But Adam, why would my mother call you daddy?
Well, I don't want the explicit tag.
Oh, okay.
Past. Not just say daddy is a nickname. Anyhow, Alex, we have so much to cover. State of play. Finally, this guy played Mixture. We have a review of a game that came out back in 2018, seemingly.
Months ago. Months in the making, yeah.
That's right. But first, as you know, it's always Gamer Juice. And I've got something not like horribly special, but I have been growing catnip in my backyard for quite a while. And I have now made catnip tea. This what it's all been for, baby. I boiled some water. I put the leaves. I put the flowers in there. Seeped it for about 15 minutes. I let it cool down because, you know, it's summer. It's like 90 degrees here. I wanted at least a cool drink, nothing hot. There's only one way to see if is there any way.
Have you had this? Wait, hold on. Have you had this before?
No, first time.
I got questions once you take a sip.
All right.
All right.
Well, it's not great.
What do you have? What does it taste like? Can you summarize it, Adam? Okay, I got so many questions about this catnip tea. Okay, what's happening there?
If you go out and you find a dandelion and you put it in your mouth and suck on it like a Jolly Rancher, that's what this tastes like.
So what inspired you to grow your own? Because you don't have a pet cat. You watch your parents' cat every once in a while. You don't have a pet cat. So what's inspired you to start growing your own catnip? Was it for the purposes of this tea?
Yeah, essentially. I was curious. I could also figure I can dehydrate it and maybe turn it into dried catnip that I can then give the cat when she visits. And then I heard it makes good tea. And maybe if I add some honey or some lemon it needs something.
So apparently catnip has like a hallucinogenic effect on cats. Are you hoping that this hallucinogenic effect translates into your own experience with ingesting catnip?
I mean, it wasn't, but if it happens, I'd rather it be on the podcast. Maybe our second segment's gonna be wild.
I need you to chug that catnip tea so we get a real wild Adam here on the second half. Just for those who don't know, Adam is the kind of guy who will eat hand sanitizer just to see what it tastes like. He is chugging the catnip tea. All right. Well, that's impressive because it doesn't sound like it tasted great.
No, that's one reason why when you said chug it, I was like, let's do it. But now
I'm a chugger.
Yeah.
Okay, but second segment, I'm going to have something else for you. It's a Jenny Craig protein shake. We'll see if I can do better round two.
I feel like at this point in time, Jenny Craig will like personally deliver that stuff. She's probably so hard up for customers that I don't even know. I haven't heard of Jenny Craig since like 1992.
Wait, is she fat? I don't even know.
Well, she used to be.
Oh, yeah?
She's probably not anymore. But if she rebounded, that would be kind of a sad story. Adam, my gamer juice this week, I went to the liquor store. I got the cheapest vodka they had at the liquor store. It's called McCormick's. Because I heard on a podcast once, you guys are listening to a podcast, you know, everything that's said on a podcast is true. I heard on a podcast that all vodka is the same because in order to call something vodka, it has to go through a very prescribed method. And then I mixed it with my favorite Kroger seltzer water. This is pink grapefruit flavor. So my Game of Juice is a nice little cocktail of a vodka, ice, and pink grapefruit Kroger seltzer water.
That sounds like a drink for Mother's Day, but I really like that glass.
Yeah, isn't this nice? Here's what's cool about this glass. My wife picked these out. These are our wine glasses. It's glass and it's like that. Deceptive, right? If you pour the vodka first, you're waiting for a height, but it's so wide that you can get a lot in there on accident. We
It's like
also have
soda can.
we also have a plastic variant for the children, so they can have whatever they want to drink,
Dude,
like
can
drink
you
drinks
hit
like
me up?
us.
Can you tell me where she got those? I want them glasses.
Do you want the plastic one that doesn't break, or do you want the glass one?
No, no, I'm gonna get the glass. Does she know where she got it?
Yeah, I'm sure she can find it because we've broken enough. We're gonna buy more. So,
Yes. Hit me up. Really, I like those. I'm gonna put something a bit more masculine in there.
like what? What are you gonna put in there? I normally drink iced coffee out of it, but it's the evening. It's Father's Day Eve. We're ready to party, man.
I mean, I might be putting a picture of Jenny Craig in there.
Is she looking good? Let me check out
Here's
Jenny
the
Craig. What's the
problem.
latest
Here's
on
the problem.
her?
Are there two Jenny Craigs? Because there's one chick that's pretty attractive, and then there's another chick that's not attractive.
Is she not attractive because she's old?
But they look totally different.
So I'll just let you know, Jenny Craig herself is 91 years old.
Then who's this blonde chick with big breasts? She's not 91. It looks like a completely different person, not just I'm looking at a picture of a 30 years younger Jenny Craig. Like
she might. Oh, that's Kirstie Alley. That's Kirstie Alley, who's also almost 60 and a Scientologist. Um, she was famous as a spokesperson for Jenny Craig, Adam.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah. Adam. Adam
Oh,
getting
I'm
all horned
also
up.
looking at an earlier picture of Christy Alley because
Yeah, Adam getting all horned up for 1990s Kirstie Alley pictures, which, hey, I get you, man. I get you. In the 90s, it meant something. It meant something.
dude, we need to get back on track because it's called VR, baby. Here's what I'm playing, Alex. Townsman VR. It's good. There's just no way around it. It was half off. I bought that shiz, and it's good. Now, one thing I'm going to complain about it. I did the demo, spent an hour playing the game, and then I bought the game. It didn't transfer over. So I had to
That
play.
sucks. Yeah.
What is that bull crap? I've never seen a demo do that. So that kind of sucked. But still, it's such a cool game to sit there, watch your minions work for you, and you put some music on in the background, or if you just wanted like some Zen time, good stuff. Like, I don't know how long it is, but I mean, I think if it's a 10-hour game, I'll be thrilled. It can't be any more than that. Let me look it up. You have any idea how long?
So I don't know how long it is, but I'm impressed. Like this is kind of like one of those city builder games, right? Like Sim City or something like that.
Kind of,
And
yeah.
it works really well. There's other games like we haven't tried the Cities game that came out. Was it 10 hours?
7, even better.
7?
Seven, I think, is right around where, especially for $20, you're like, yeah, I got use out of that,
Yeah.
and it doesn't overstay its welcome. Like
Mhm.
I've wanted to throw Legendary Tales in the trash months ago, but I can't because I spent so much on it that I have to keep playing it.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, you know, more people are coming out of the woodworks now saying like I think Legendary Tales is overrated. Like somebody on Reddit had a post that was highly upvoted saying like, "Hey, I'm sorry, Legendary Tales is overrated." Um, I don't agree, but I could see how somebody could think that.
Well, it's
But
boring. It's repetitive. I mean, you're right. The physics are cool, but they need to do more with it. But whatever. This is a Legendary Tales discussion. Houndsman VR is cool. I recommend it for a buy. And the only thing I wish I would have bought it before. But how are you going to?
there's so are you interested in other games like this? Because this reminds me of like Cities, Skyline, or whatever came out that we never touched. That's probably pretty good in VR. It's a similar kind of thing. There's that other one that's like 10 Soldier VR or 10 Hearts VR that actually looks like it might be this, but with a story. Um, is this making you want to look at some other games that we haven't even thought about that have come out at around launch?
I mean, I don't think a tycoon type thing like Sim City. I don't know if I would honestly like that. This is so the diorama of it, the ability to interact with the little people. It's got a little something extra that I think really helps seal the deal. I mean, maybe most of the games that are coming out right now, I'm just going to be honest, suck. So I'm going to need something, or I just throw my headset in the trash. So maybe I'll look at the Hearts game. Didn't know it even existed.
It's like 10 Man Hearts or 10 Hearts, something like that. I'll look it up later. Yeah, what I've been playing, listen, it's not a VR game. It's Helldivers 2. I've been playing the hell out of that. So if anybody's playing that, look for PlayPSVR underscore Alex. I'll play with you. I'll play with anybody at Helldivers 2. But alongside that, I've been playing Mixture, which we'll have for a review. That's been my go-to VR game as of late. Listen, Adam and I got a lot of VR in a short amount of time during May Days. Adam, how are you feeling about May Days overall? Were you happy? Were you glad you did it? I always feel glad I did it when we're done. How do you feel?
Um, I mean, for us doing it, yeah, I'm like, I feel cool about that. What I am not so cool on, it made me realize how top heavy the PSVR 2 game catalog is. You've got some absolute freaking bangers, maybe 15 of them. And then the rest of them, they none of them are like bad. They're not 18 floors, special delivery, rabbit hole bad, but they're just, I don't know, so average that they're forgetful and they're not fun, which I argue might actually be worse than just being truly awful. I will never
Oh
forget
yeah.
this, right? And they've got something going on. Stunt Kite Masters sucks. You love it and you continue to talk about it. So I don't know, man. Like, so yeah, that's my overall impressions of the game catalog, and part of me is saddened by that because other
I
than like
think
8 games, I don't want to play VR. None of these games I want to play again or even want to play when they come out, and that just kind of sucks.
well, I so there's two things I want to point to. The first you're not gonna like is that Adam, you don't buy anything, right? So like you're stuck with these games that you got to launch, except for maybe Townsend VR. There are a bunch of like mid-tier games that are really good to play that you don't even entertain the thought. And I get why not. But you are missing out on stuff because you are
I'm
more hesitant to
sorry,
purchase.
I'm sorry, I'm not buying Pigeons VR
No,
soon.
no, no, but like Ghost Signal, that Stellaris game. That's a really good game, and you won't even entertain it. I mean, they even have a demo, right? You should play that, play the demo, and see if you like it. But it's not a AAA VR game, which we're all looking for. If it came out on consoles, probably nobody would bat an eye. But in VR, I think it works really well. But you bring up another good point, which is my second point, is that the VR library is really top heavy because what you get is you get a lot of AAA games, AAA titles that are really good and they're really polished and they don't really flop. GT7 is a great game. Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 8, they're both great games. Now, what the normal console gaming space has is not only AAA games that are great, but they have AAA quality games that flop. Looking at things like Forspoken, right? Or some of these games that come out that what's that game, that zombie game that nobody played that came from that group in Oregon? I can't remember the name. Riding around on a motorcycle. Anyways, you have these games that have high production values, but they don't quite hit the mark. They maybe just break even on their investment costs, but that's still in the library. And you can still play it and enjoy it and have a great time with it. But in VR, it seems like there's no room for wasted space. So you either get VR versions of games that are proven to be excellent, and then everything after that is like indie games, right? There's no middle class in VR, I guess I would say. And that's probably what you're probably disappointed in is that there's either like this Supreme, they have unlimited money, so they're making a VR game mode because what the hell, why not? Or they're indie gamers, indie developers, and they make legendary tales and stuff like that. So personally, I'm okay with that. I love this experimental weird stuff, but you're right. There's no middle class, mid tier VR games out there, at least seemingly for the most part. Maybe the last middle class VR game we got was Synapse, right?
I mean, where's the stifleds or the invisible hours or to the tops? Things that are really different, but utilize VR exceedingly well and have some creativity to them.
So
There's nothing creative about Zenith. The only game that fits in that category, in my opinion, is Through Your Eyes or whatever that game was called.
before your eyes, yeah.
That one did a good job at presenting a unique game that we've never seen before. I give it its laurels because of that. But we don't have these, you know?
That's a good point, Adam. Because like PSVR 1, when it came out, it was really new, right? So there was a lot of heavy experimentation going on. I
Vertigo
do feel,
Home.
yeah. Ooh, man, I wish we get a sequel to that. I'd love to see what crazy stuff those guys do with eye tracking. But it's yeah, in the first generation of VR, we got a lot of experimentation. It does seem like we still get experimentation, but there's less experimentation because people understand the level at which the VR has entered into the gaming ecosystem. For things like Invisible Hours, which I freaking loved, there is Seventh Guest, which you haven't tried. I'm kind of dying to try, but I got other games I got to play. That game looks like it's interesting in the same vein, but you're right. I do think there's less just sheer experimentation in the middle class of games and more like just indie garbage, and then also indie stuff that ends up being pretty good, right? So like another example is the Light Brigade. That's an indie game that's ended up being really, really good, but it's still not quite like middle class double A gaming or anything like that. It's still indie. It's just really good indie. So yeah, it's just maybe we'll get there. And I think moving on to our next topic, Adam, we do have the state of play announcements, and I think we have some space there. Did you watch the state of play at all, Adam? I think you were away at work or
I
something.
watched the Behemoth,
Yeah.
and I watched the Alien trailer, and I saw that there was no Astrobot.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the big takeaways for VR, right? Like, I don't know if this state of play is the definitive Sony showcase in the summer of what they're, because, there's no E3 now, right? So, this is their one chance in the summer to show off what they have. We didn't get much in like the Summer Game Fest. State of play, basically for VR, we learned that Behemoth, they showed footage of that. They showed footage of the Alien game. And then we also unfortunately learned that Astrobot does not have a VR mode. There is still the Upload VR showcase, which showcases VR games, but that's not you're not going to find out about a Sony first party title in that showcase. So it does seem like from Sony themselves, there's not going to be much first party VR support, which there's never really been. But we can talk about these news items at least, Adam. Adam, how do you feel about the fact that Astrobot, there's not a VR component to the new Astrobot game?
I mean, a part of me is not surprised. I'm still bummed out, obviously. I think this and the news that there's going to be a PC VR adapter, which we'll talk about probably next segment, is really telling on where Sony's head is when it comes to VR. And it's simply that it's cooked. That they don't care. They don't see the financial advantage in it. They, rather than creating stuff and games and support for their own hardware, they're just going to put it on PC VR, let them do the work. It's a dead product. That's how I'm feeling. And Astrobot, I think, shows that. Like, I don't know how you can't even have a VR
So
mode, right? Like,
so I'm extremely disappointed that Astrobot's not in VR, right? Like Astrobot, although it didn't first exist in VR, it first existed from like the Sony iToy camera. Um, the fact that Astrobot, which created or VR, which created Astrobot, doesn't get support in the Astrobot game, that's disappointing, right? We all want to see an Astrobot in VR again. But if you look at the timeline of Team Asobi and the games they make, this kind of makes sense, right? They made this iToy game, didn't really go anywhere. Then when the PSVR 1 came out, they made a free Astrobot game for PSVR 1, and it was amazing, right? Everybody loved it. They loved it so much that Sony was like, hey, let's give you money. You can make a full game out of it. They made a full game out of it, and it sold like gangbusters. Then their next project was to develop something similar for PlayStation 5. They made Astro's Playroom or whatever it was on PS5, which honestly was enough content to be like a $20 game, but they gave it away for free. And it almost sold the system for a lot of people. Like, you get this game that's really good for free on the PS5, and then it makes sense. Sony says, hey, you made something that's a freaking banger. We're going to give you money to make a full-fledged game out of it, just like we did with Astro's Rescue Mission, and then the full game that came out, or maybe the full game was Rescue Mission. So we're kind of seeing this pattern of, like, they make a free version of a game, then they get money to make a full version of the game, and it's great. They made a free version of Astro's Playroom for PS5. Of course, they're going to get money to make a full version of Astro's Playroom for the PS5. So it doesn't surprise me that, given the opportunity of making a VR game for, I don't know, 1 million PSVR 2 users, or making a PS5 game for, God knows, 10 million, something like that, PS5 users, why they would go to focus on a PS5 flat game. Although they did say that, they didn't shoehorn any VR stuff here because this game wasn't designed around VR. And that maybe that's like integrity on the developer side, where they say, we're not going to make a VR game unless we're going to make like a freaking VR game. Or they're just, gently saying like they didn't have the resources to make a VR port. It's disappointing. It's not an outlier in terms of track record. I would still love to see, PSVR 2 might be one of the first Sony hardware devices that they haven't put Team Asobi on to make a VR game or some kind of like demonstration of the software. I would love it if we could see Astrobot in VR, just a half hybrid mode or something, but it doesn't sound like it's going to happen. So yeah, that was really frustrating. But Adam, you said you watched the Behemoth footage. We didn't know much about Behemoth. It's made by the people who made Saints and Sinners. I can't remember their name. Did you watch the footage of Behemoth fully? What are your thoughts on Behemoth?
Behemoth and Alien look good. No, I think we got to see more potentially day one buy. I mean, based on the stuff that's been coming out for PSVR 2, yeah, they look pretty good. So there's still some things I need I just don't remember. Honestly, I'm just like, if it's on any other VR, my interest level really drops unless they specifically make use of the PSVR 2 hardware. If they do that, then I don't care where it's available. But if we're just getting versatile, dumbed down versions of games, I think that's part of the PSVR 2's problem. Is that we're getting a bunch of these games that can be played on Quest and the other hardwares. And I mean, it makes sense. You can't personalize it for everybody. And I understand the business decision of make it to where the most people can play it. But then for us who has, I'm probably biased, but at least in a lot of ways, the superior hardware, we get worse versions that don't utilize it, and then it ruins it. But Alex, we need to move on to your review because I want to hear about it. I've been waiting for years, and then I'll come back and talk to you about why I don't care that Legendary Tales has a demo, and then maybe we can cover the games that were on PS Plus.
Okay, if you want to start a review, tell me when you want to start a review, Adam. Do you want to start the review now?
Do it, man. Just do it.
That's right. We are starting the review. It was the game that I played this week. Mixture. The Mixture review starts now. Now, boilerplate stuff out of the way. Developer is Played with Fire. That's the company that made the game. The publisher is Perp Games. We love you, Perp Games. The price of the game is $25, and the code was provided by Perp Games. So thank you so much for providing that. Now, Adam, I don't know if you've seen much about Mixture. I don't know if you've watched any footage, but instantly, if you watch footage, you understand what Mixture's going for. Now, this is a game that's looking for that niche market, looking for that type of game that follows the path set by Moss, our beloved Moss third-person action game. So with that, we're going to go in and we're going to first charge Mixture with its first charge 1, on a quest to be average. Now, Adam, first, I want to talk about the mechanics of Mixture. Mixture is a third-person action kind of RPG game, just like Moss. where you have a person that you're controlling with your analog sticks. They're moving around. You have a little character named Sola, I think, or Sora. It's a moth that has a scythe, and you walk around these environments. You can fight enemies with your scythe. But then you are also inhabiting a person called an alchemist who exists as kind of a ghostly person in this universe who helps the moth solve the problems in the environment. So very similar to what you have in Moss, right? In Moss, you have a mouse and you're a ghost. In this, you're an alchemist and you have a moth running around. Now the interactions are very similar, right? It's different games, but very similar. You can directly control your character, Sora, and directly attack and directly maneuver and move and stuff like that. But then you also have these special powers as this ghost alchemist where you can create these concoctions. I shouldn't say create, but you have these concoctions, these vials of chemicals that you can throw on enemies, throw on the environments to cause effects. So one good example is like I can make this glue chemical and I shake it up and it gets really strong and I throw it and it will either hold an enemy to their position so I can attack them more easily so they don't fight me. Or I can throw it on a platform so that it doesn't crumble when I jump on it. Or I throw it on like an air pocket so that air pocket closes so I can walk over it instead of getting blown away, stuff like that. So there is an integration with your first person character and your third person character in this VR component. That's really nice. It works pretty well. But the reason this charge is on a quest to be average is because it's very obvious the game is developed primarily with quest in mind. The graphics are sharp and they're serviceable, but they don't quite lend themselves to anything special for PSVR 2. I don't see eye tracked foveated rendering, fine. But I don't see like headset rumble. I don't see haptic feedback. I don't see all the stuff that I like about my PSVR 2. It really feels like I have a bare bones port of a Quest game put on my PSVR 2, which on one hand isn't the worst thing in the world, right? I want to play as many games as I can on this headset, but it is disappointing that we have these wasted or underutilized resources on my game. So as I play through the game, a game that a console that I know can push out Resident Evil 4, Gran Turismo 7 type graphics, I'm stuck playing a game that feels very much like it probably would on the Quest. And it's a bit of disappointment. But for the charge of on a Quest to be average, I find Mixture to be guilty. Any questions, Adam?
This is disappointing because I'm not gonna lie. I looked up just a trailer, 50 seconds, right? I'm not gonna lie, it looked pretty good. It's in my mind the best of what Moss did in a not 13-year-old girl package. First, it's you look like a Mothman, I guess. It reminded me of Spawn, like the look of it. It's like, oh, yeah, you're controlling the Spawn character and then interacting with the environments and stuff, and it's like it looks like a more adult game. So that's a bummer to hear that you can't see and you can't feel how the game plays in a trailer. So it's disappointing to hear about as a Quest that you think, it's kind of a Quest game. I guess I don't have a question. I'm bummed because when I first looked, I was like, you are going to have to convince me not to buy this game from the trailer. And it was a rough first charge, but let's go with the second.
Yeah, and that's a good segue, Adam. So on the second charge, we're going to be investigating whether or not this is guilty of telling it to the judge. All right, so second charge. Really, we're looking at things about how this game presents itself, right? I mean, we know that it's going for what Moss is looking for. How does it separate itself? Well, I will say, Moss is good for the environments that you saw, right? But I think in terms of storytelling, Moss lacked in some departments, right? I never felt invested. Here, I think there's a decent amount of story and world building in this environment. It's a bit more mature, like you suggested, Adam, right? You're not this cute little mouse. You're this moth knight. And you belong to an order of knights, and all these knights are kind of named after or are these specific characters. So there's like a hound, and there's a porcupine, and there's a pangolin, and all sorts of stuff like that. And as you play through the game, you start to realize that there is certainly a universe that has been developed around this game. And there's enough visual storytelling for you to understand that, there's a certain depth to it. But the issue comes when you're trying to find details to anchor this visual storytelling too, right? Like I know that I am this alchemist, this giant, ethereal, almost godlike creature that is kind of governing the interactions of what happens with my character, my little moth character. But I don't quite understand the interplay there. I don't know where I came from. I don't know how these characters play into the universe, and that stuff gets divulged in the story, which is interesting. But you kind of have to dig, and you have to have patience, and you have to have like an earnestness in your approach to the game story to really understand that relationship that's happening. So on one hand, it is like Moss, and there's some good visual storytelling, good world building. But on the other hand, it's unlike Moss, and it's a bit more mature of a story in some sense that it expects more of you as the story viewer to kind of put the pieces together. Some people might like that, some people might hate that, but there were points in the story where I was like, hey, this is actually a really interesting theme that they're exploring here, right? Like at some point I get kicked out of my order of knights. At some point I have to worry about what somebody I just met that I thought was a good friend is now behaving differently. There's interesting stuff happening at play, and then even the visual storytelling is pretty nice. As you're going through the environments, you see these giant statues around you that represent statues of the character that you are as the alchemist, kind of giving you insight as to what's going on. So it's difficult. There are parts of the story that I think, yeah, whatever, that's throwaway. There's parts of the story that's like, that's really interesting. I really like what they did there. So I don't know whether to say like I love the story or I hate the story, or you could throw it away or you got to keep it close. But there's stuff there that makes this game really interesting. Um, but all told, it feels like you're jumping into the middle of a story that seemed to have a book that came before it, or a movie you had to watch, or something like that. So I always feel a little bit out of the loop, unfortunately, to be fully invested in the story. And for that, I am giving Mixture on the charge of telling it to the judge a guilty. Any questions, Adam?
I don't know what you were trying to get across. I guess there's both good and bad. Um, uh, okay, go third charge. The final verdict is gonna be telling, I think.
All right, we're going to the third charge. A third charge of living on a diet of moss. All right, going in third charge. So the game ultimately, obviously, as I've expressed, the game feels like a diet version of Moss, right? Moss is this almost AAA quality game. They had two games, pristine production values, so much is involved in it. This game feels like it's going for what Moss looks for, but it's just a different company with different funding behind it. The mechanics are very similar. You control, then you can manipulate as a ghost, third-party ethereal creature. There's limited platforming, but just like Moss, there's no jump button, so the platforming is only so. And it feels like a jump button would really hate, but honestly, the engine of the game feels like it lacks a little bit of weight. I go into combat. The combat feels kind of flat, feels kind of serviceable. It's not that it's not engaging, right? Like I'm paying attention when I'm playing, the fighting scenes and stuff like that. But it just doesn't have that oomph to it. And maybe that oomph could be provided if they used like good haptics in the PSVR 2, or they made my headset rumble when something happened. But the combat just feels totally separate to what you're doing in the gameplay. One thing I do need to note is that the primary mechanic of you as this alchemist is that you're grabbing these vials. You hit the button to open up your menu. You grab a vial, you touch the mixture you want to make, and then you throw it. Now, one interesting thing it does is it uses eye tracked throwing mechanics. So you look where you want to throw, then you throw it. It's going to go where you looked rather than where you actually threw it, which is nice. But again, that's another level of separation. I don't feel the throw, and the throw feels kind of like lofty and floaty. So I don't feel like I'm throwing the things. I watched somebody play the game on Quest, and like things seem much more interactive and instantaneous when they threw it. But I hate throwing things in VR because there's no weight there. So like while it's cool that it did the eye track aiming, it kind of makes the throwing feel a bit floaty and less exciting. And also the throwing mechanics you're doing just feel almost inconsequential. I mean, there's some enemies you can't kill unless you hit them with a chemical, but when I throw a glue on an enemy and it's so short-lived and my attacks feel like, I don't feel much feedback in my attacks, just makes combat not feel great. And it makes the whole thing overall, getting stuck in environments, the floaty maneuvers of the character. It feels like my character's kind of gliding along the environments. Compare that to something like Moss, where you feel like you had this weight with this mouse character covered in armor running around. You just feel detached from the entire experience. And so, on the charge of living on a diet of moss, I find Mixture guilty. Any questions, Adam?
I this one's tough for me. Even after your review, I'm on the edge. Like it seems like it has potential, but I want to hear your final thoughts.
All right. Well, my final thoughts. I mean, the biggest thing is I love that we're getting explorations of different VR models, right? My favorite thing that can happen in VR is somebody makes a really cool mechanic or really cool game design, and then people iterate on that and make, better versions of that. Ubisoft pioneered the Assassin's Creed model of gaming, and then we got Ghost of Tsushima, which is this great version of that game model. Moss pioneered this third person, sort of first person interaction model of games. And then we're getting Mixture, which is a clone of that game model, but they explore different things with it. But this game does bring to the forefront how much of the magic of Moss was in production value and presentation and polish, and not entirely reliant on that mechanic of like controlling a third person in VR. And so Moss, we're something like Moss wins on like its charm and its polish. When we lose that stuff in a game like Mixture, we start to realize that it's going to take more than just this mechanic alone to make you really want to play a VR game. And so, the final count, do we find Mixture to be a game worthy of your purchase? I find Mixture hung. Unfortunately, hung. I enjoy Mixture. I enjoy what it's doing. I enjoy the storytelling, but it ultimately feels like a game that's hard to recommend. So if you look at somebody who really loves Moss, and they love Moss for the things that are technical about it, the gameplay of it, then yeah, Mixture might be right up your alley. If you love Moss for the production values and the charm and how sweet it was, then maybe Mixture might disappoint you a little bit. Any last thoughts, Adam?
No, another end of the break. Let's put it on the list. I might have a question after I get to think about it over the break, but let's take it there. Stick with us, folks. We're going to continue talking about Mixture, talk about the PC VR adapter for the PSVR 2. We've got some sales, good stuff coming up, so stay with us. It's segment 2 of PSVR 2, the podcast. This is episode 150, Alex. I feel like we just glossed over that 150 episodes. That is like 1.5 Christy or Jenny Craig's.
Kirstie Alley movies, Kirstie Alley shows. Yeah. Yeah. One and a half Jenny Craig's, no Kirstie Alley.
No, Jenny Craig. You said she was like 100, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she's like 91. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
One and a half Jenny Craig's.
Pretty wild. So I had the break to think about it. I've got some questions about Mixture. I don't know if you did a good job convincing me not to buy it. I hate Moss. I think it's so stupid. It's a game that a 7-year-old should play. This doesn't look like that. It's named after one of the best video game protagonists in history, in Sora.
Who? Oh, Sora. Yeah.
So I had a question. I totally effing blanked. So you said it's hung. So, and you mentioned who wouldn't like this game, but who would like this game? If it's hung, that means there's a portion of the demographic that will like it and should buy it. Who are those people?
I mean, I'm one of the people that kind of likes this game, right? Like,
Oh my! He's back.
This is
You're
this.
backtracking like a
No,
Clydesdale on
no, no,
a
no, no, no.
muddy afternoon.
Don't get me wrong. The reason this is hung is not because I think the audience is 50-50 on whether or not they'd like this game. This is hung because I personally am 50-50 on whether or not I like this game. Because there are times when I get incredibly frustrated with the game, when I wish there was a jump button so I wouldn't get caught on the corners of environments and have to kill myself and lose progress just to move forward. There's buggy stuff that happens. There's incomprehensible stuff that happens that makes me annoyed at the game. But then on the other hand, it's a game where I went in thinking like this is a VR game and it's half baked and the story is going to be dumb. And then I start paying attention to the story. And I'm like, hey, there's actually some interesting stuff going on here, which made me motivated to want to play the game, warts and all, that made me want to keep going through it. So it's like I'm personally am torn because I don't know. I have a hard time recommending the game because there's things that I personally like that others might not like. There's things that I personally have issues with that might not be an issue with others. And so if you are looking for like, man, I just really love the whole idea of Moss and running around with this character and I can control this kind of diorama environment, then maybe this is your jam and you would love this regardless of the downfalls of it. But if you're a person who liked Moss for how cute it was, or how the mouse was so endearing, or how much polish there was in the game, then this isn't a game for you. Does that clarify it a bit more?
Do you think I would like it?
Adam, you hate everything. I don't think you'd like it. I
F you.
don't think, no, but
F
aside from
you.
that,
Put it on the list.
I don't think there's anything in this game that would make you really love it. Now, obviously, this is going to go below the moss in the game. Looking down in the area, we're down below Demio. I think it fits very nicely in this area where we have like Arashi and Pixel Ripped. I think it's above Zenith for sure, above Dyschronia. Maybe above Dyschronia. I don't know how Zenith got so freaking high on our list, Adam. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put this.
That's how.
You put it above Tetris Effect somehow. I'm gonna.
Well, Tetris Effect garbage. So yeah.
What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put it above Pixel Ripped 1978. So that puts it somewhere at around like 30, the 30th best game we've reviewed. So we're gonna put Mixture right there, which I think is fair. If we gave numerical scores and I had to give this a numerical score, I'd probably give it like a solid 6.5 or 7 out of 10. With Moss being something like a 9 for me. It's not a bad game by any means. It's just, man, they could have put some more elbow grease into it for the PSVR 2 and made it like an absolute banger. And they didn't. And I understand why they didn't, but they just didn't do it. And I don't want to give it chops for that.
Well, it's going to be 31, not too long when I rate Townsman VR, baby. So,
oh, yeah.
We maybe do a miniature master debater, not the whole fanfare of a master debater, but I'm a bit hot and bothered about the PSVR 2 PC adapter.
Yeah.
I think my some of the issues I have with this. Number one, I've already touched on it. I feel like this is a clear, we made this headset. Maybe we don't want to leave those who purchased it, and we don't want to leave the fans completely high and dry. But clearly, we are not going to support it. They have not put any of their personal teams other than frickin' I'm blanking on the name, Firewall Ultra people who they immediately let go after that. We're not designing anything for the PSVR 2. We clearly don't give a crap about it to where there's not even a VR mode in Astrobot. I know you're going to argue, hey, they gave money to Capcom to make the Resident Evils, which is good. I'm glad they did that. But it just doesn't seem like this is something they care about. And so rather than just saying, F you guys, they're like, okay, here's an adapter for the PC VR. We aren't going to support it. So you can go onto the wide world web of Steam, and there you can play games so you're not left hanging. But that's the best we're going to do. That, I think, is upsetting because I think they have the best hardware. The games were fun. Obviously, as someone who purchased this, if I wanted to play PC VR and I wanted to mess with the computer specs and buy $1,000 computer to run VR, don't you think I would have done that? In fact, I already did do that. I bought the PlayStation, which was like 600, and then I bought the headset, which was 500. So now, like, it just that's my first. It's very aggravating, and there's probably like 2 or 3 points up in there. I don't like it. That's my first reasoning, and I'm sure you're gonna be, oh, but now we can play Battlezone. Which I love me some Battlezone, but how about you port it to the PS5 rather than freaking making us get it on Steam and buy $100 adapter and maybe have a computer strong enough to actually run it.
So, I mean, you brought up a couple points that I want to comment on. Firstly, we're looking at like, what does it mean that Sony's adding this new support for Steam VR? And one comparison I can make is like, Stadia, right? I love Google Stadia. Everybody else in the world hated it, but I love Google Stadia. And I really like the controller that came with Google Stadia. It had a really good controller. And one thing that Google did when they killed Google Stadia was they added an update so that you could use the Google Stadia controller on things outside of Stadia, which they didn't need to do, although they might have been obligated, right? They could have been looking at like, when they killed Google Stadia, they refunded all the money anybody paid for Google Stadia to buy games on it, which was a good move. They probably would have gotten sued had they not. So maybe that's why they made that support for the PS or for the Stadia controller. I don't think Sony was in the same bind, right? If Sony tomorrow declared they're no longer going to make PSVR 2 games or support it, they wouldn't get sued because they haven't overpromised anything. So what I see from this is Sony has put in the R&D and put in the production pipeline the ability for users to buy an adapter for $60, which I'll admit isn't cheap, but given the price of everything in the world these days, it's not terribly expensive in order for you to use your PSVR 2 headset on the PC. They've invested money, obviously. They're making something and they're selling it so that we can have this added functionality. Now, it could be that this is Sony's way of softly exiting the PSVR 2 market while still trying to encourage people to buy the headset. But given Sony's proclivity to making PC VR or PC versions of games, looking at Ghost of Tsushima, looking at Horizon, looking at their latest cash cow, Helldivers 2, Sony rightly recognizes that there is an ample market for PC VR purchases of their games. So in one light, this is Sony backing out and giving you an avenue to still enjoy your headset, which is nice of them, right? They didn't have to do it, and they did it. The other avenue is that Sony recognizes that, hey, we might have this space where we can make VR games and sell them not only to PC people, but sell them to PSVR 2 people as well. And so they're kind of being able to double dip on their investment, double dip on the installed user base that they can be recouping this development cost from. So I get where people are coming from when they're saying, hey, this is Sony's way of backing out of VR. But you have to remember, Sony didn't need to do this. There's no reason why Sony had to do this. And they did it. And if the VR headsets are the lost leader, right? If they're losing money on every VR headset they sold in hopes that they'll make money back when people buy games for VR, Sony doesn't have any games on Steam VR, and they're still making this thing. So to me, this is a way for Sony to get more headsets in people's homes, hopefully people who have a PSVR 2, and make that PSVR 2 $500 price tag a bit more attractive, which sounds unattractive. $500 is $500 is a lot of money. And when you look at something like an Oculus 3, that thing is $500 in its cheapest form, which, yeah, you get the Oculus stuff, you get the Oculus shovelware, but most people or a lot of people are buying it also recognizing that I can play this on PC. So now Sony's just cut the legs out of one of the greatest competitive advantages that their competitor Oculus has, and they've allowed a PC, an easier way to making this stuff happen. So yeah, that's my counter to that point, Adam, is that really this PC support to me shows that Sony, they have something in mind with their VR headset. If they were really abandoning VR the way people are saying, then they wouldn't even make this adapter at all.
I mean, you could bang my wife and say sorry. Okay. You didn't need to say sorry, but you did. Okay. Thanks. But you still banged my wife. And like, okay, so
But the
cool.
difference is I don't have to pay money, do R&D, and then release something, commercial to say sorry about banging your wife. I could just bang your wife and say sorry and it cost me nothing.
But if they want to be a good guy and this is they're gonna get a ton, or they would have gotten a ton of backlash. Oh, it's the PSP all over again. They have a great console slash headset, hardware, whatever. And then look, everyone actually loved it, and then they dropped it. And if that continues to happen, no one's gonna buy anything again unless it's a main staple console, which I would imagine would be hard for them to sustain as a business, just relying solely on PlayStation console sales. Maybe it's possible, I don't know. But obviously, look at Nintendo. They're really good at selling their main things, but then they've got accessories and toys and like other stuff that people buy, and that's a good way to do the business. So in my mind, and admittedly, it is a negative mindset. It very much could be, and I will admit that they were like, we already got the PlayStation users in the bag, right? So how better can we increase our touch base? Well, get the people who don't have a headset but have a computer. Valve is out of the whole space. So
Yeah.
okay, let's make this adapter to get those people, not expecting that the PlayStation people would also need to buy it. The issue I have with that is it would be different if we saw them putting out VR games or we saw them supporting. And I mean, it seems like we almost have to beg them to put anything about VR in the showcase. It's taken them a year and a half to finally put a game on PlayStation Plus that isn't Humanity, that's VR2. So them not doing anything with it and then adding this adapter makes me pessimistic. Whereas if the opposite were true, they were making stuff, they make this adapter, I think that's much more palatable and it's easier to see where they're going. I also think, just personally, when I bought the VR, I like the idea. I bought this effing console to play VR2. It's doing stuff that VR like no other headset can do. It's simple. I plug it in, I turn it on, boom, there we go. Now I've got to look at PC specs. I've got to like Battlezone. We have games that I want to play, I can't play. And then you get dumbed down versions taking the best parts of the hardware off of it. I mean, it just seems like a lose-lose. I mean, I know you can say you now have access to how many more games, and that is true, but it's like getting access to a bunch of Quest games. I don't want that. So, I don't know. I still don't like it. I know you're thrilled. You probably can't wait. You're going to pre-order it day one. You're going to play 30 minutes of all types of different games and not finish a single one, and you're going to be a happy little Alex sitting in his little freaking tree house diddling. I don't know.
What am I diddling? What am I diddling, Adam?
Nothing. It's Father's Day. I'm going to be respectful to you.
Adam, you touched on a couple of good points, right? I mean, one thing you mentioned was all the cool stuff PSVR 2 does, right? It's got the headset haptics, it's got the special haptics in the controller, it's got the eye tracking, foveated rendering. And Sony announced that like a lot of these cool features aren't going to be available through that PC adapter. Now, the question is out there, right? Is that hardware limited? Can we not do it because the hardware just can't transmit that information? Or is it software limited? As in, there's not a single PC VR game out there right now that does that. So why even work? Why even say that it's going to be able to do it when none of these games are going to support that? That's a lingering question we have until the adapter comes out and we can actually play these games. But to your point, right? Like That's one of the selling points of the headset is that it has HDR, it's got these beautiful OLEDs, it's got the eye track foveated rendering, and that's not going to be available. I mean, the OLEDs will be available, but the HDR is not going to be available through the adapter, which is disappointing some people. I will say, I think the PSVR 2 controllers are the best controllers I've used in VR. I don't care for the Quest controller that much. And so I'm excited to use those on a Steam VR setup. The plug and play aspect that you mentioned, if I want to use my Quest on VR, I have to maybe install some Oculus garbage on my computer. I have to buy some separate app. I mean, I know there's a native app, but really the best way to do this wireless Quest stuff is through virtual desktop. Got to pay for that extra thing. I then have to make sure my computer is ready to share information, make sure I have a good wireless network connection, which isn't guaranteed in order to play a game seamlessly. However, if I'm using the PSVR 2, granted, there's a cord, but I just plug that into the back of my GPU, and I'm more or less off to the races. No weird controller stuff happening, no weird configuration, no weird third-party apps I have to apply. I think there's a victory there. And so despite the fact that you're losing some key features, which could be software developed back into the ecosystem, it's becoming like one of the better headsets you can get. It's going to be comfortable. It's going to be more comfortable than the Quest. That's for damn sure. Valve's not making a new index from what we gather. There's not much PC VR support out there. So there's a whole ecosystem of VR that's going to benefit greatly from the PSVR being able to plug and play. And bonus, if you got a PS5 already, guess what? Now you got these PSVR 2 games. So I think Sony's doing something kind of clever, also a bit business savvy, right? They don't want to neuter the benefits of the PSVR 2 by suddenly making it PC VR available. So I think that's some of the stuff happening there. Talking about the library, right? Like it's a win. Maybe Sony lobbied Valve to make Half-Life Alyx on the PSVR 2, and it didn't go anywhere because Valve probably keeps that stuff close to their chest. They don't want to not lose control of the income that they'd be getting from Half-Life Alyx. But when Sony announced this, Half-Life Alyx was in the screenshot announcing it. Sony knows we want to play Half-Life Alyx. If you have a PSVR 2 headset and a PS or a VR capable PC, you're going to be playing Half-Life Alyx. And that's huge, right? Like it's what this is what's weird about this announcement is it's what we all wanted. We all wanted to be able to at least use this headset on the PC in some capacity. And now that Sony gave us exactly what we asked for the most part, 90% of what we asked for, people are crapping on it as if it's not enough. It's still not taking anything away from the PSVR 2. It's not taking anything away from PCVR. It's just giving you extra functionality and software that you haven't, and hardware that you purchased, and they had no obligation to provide you. Now, your last point is like, you wish Sony was making VR games. We all wish Sony was making first-party VR games. We all wish Sony made Astrobot. But outside of Astrobot, is there any first-party or almost first-party game made by Sony on the PSVR 1, for example, that was better than the stuff we got from third parties that Sony helped finance? Is there a game on PSVR 1 that was better than Resident Evil 7? Is there a game on PSVR 1 that was better than No Man's Sky? I don't think so. So what is it that Sony, who's hard pressed to put games out on PS5 in general from a first party perspective, what are we missing that Sony could be doing other than saying, hey, this third party developer, they're really good. Let's just throw money at them to make them make a VR game rather than us trying to waste money to make another Riggs, which is going to fail because nobody cares about it. What am I missing?
Actually, wasn't that bad, sadly.
Riggs was great, honestly. Like I loved Riggs, but it's an IP that's not going to move units. It's not going to turn the dial on PSVR 2 success. So why should Sony waste money developing these first-party titles when they could throw probably less money at an experienced studio in Capcom to port their existing games to PSVR 2? I'd much rather see Metal Hellsinger VR ported to PSVR 2 than see some other weird licensed tie-in like Horizon Call of the Mountain, which is like, yeah, it's a good game. It's a good Horizon game, but it's not Horizon in VR. I want to see the game I know in VR. That's what things like Metal Hellsinger VR is doing. That's what things like Resident Evil 4 VR is doing. That's not what a Sony first-party VR game would be doing.
It just bothers me that, yeah, your game library got bigger, but it's simply just Sony mooching off the games that are already on PCVR. Like, if you want to support your hardware, get it done. Find a way to get Half-Life Alyx on the PlayStation Store. Let me get it there. Don't make the consumer ensue your debt by having to buy an additional PC and adapter, and I even know the third-party stuff you were talking about, just to play a game that if you did your job well and you supported your hardware, that you should have on the PlayStation Store. It's, in a way, and I know you don't agree with this, it's almost reminds me of the whole student debt situation. Whereas the people who, when they were talking about forgiving all the student debt, the people who we went to school and we sucked and we suffered and we sacrificed and we paid off our debts, it doesn't affect us that the student loans were forgiven. But it still seems like a slap in the face that some of these other people are coming out of college and getting it paid for. And I made the sacrifice. That's the same thing happening. I made the sacrifice of choosing PlayStation over these other things, choosing the headset. Now, I know we have the podcast, so we were always going to get it. But for those who maybe don't run a podcast, they were like, we're putting our eggs in the better hardware and into the Sony basket. And then guess what? Psych. Now you got to buy this additional stuff really to get the use out of your headset. It's not wrong necessarily, but it doesn't feel right. I don't like it. I don't believe in it. And
well, I see what you're saying, right? It seems like Sony's throwing their hands up and saying, listen, we're not going to worry about making games for VR anymore. If you really care about VR, play it on the PC. And that would be true if we didn't have so many damn games in the pipeline. I mean, looking at it, Alien Rogue Incursion, developed by Servios, that's going to be a banger.
Two games.
I know. Let me. I'm not done. Zombie Army VR, developed by Rebellion, that's going to be a banger. That's a known entity that's very fun to play, made by a developer who understands VR well. That's going to be a banger. Metro Awakening, a notable AAA IP, getting a VR version of game, that's going to be a banger. Developed by Vertigo Games, people who, again, know VR. Then Behemoth. This game looks incredible. And it's developed again by another studio who really knows VR very well. Then, not to mention Metal Hellsinger VR, which I already talked about. Like, that's out of nowhere. Nobody's asking for that. And now that they're offering it to us, like, great. This is amazing. I can't believe we're getting it. Wanderer, Fragments of Fate, still to come out, but it's coming out in September. That's going to be an awesome game. Then games, Aces of Thunder, right? They're still showing new footage. They're developing that. We're going to see that before we know it. There's still brilliant games in the pipeline for PSVR 2. Now, Sony announced the PC adapter as a consolation prize for them abandoning the platform. Then we wouldn't have, 7 games to be excited about on the PSVR 2 ecosystem. So I get your trepidation of like, this is Sony's soft exit, but that's not borne out in the upcoming library that we see in the second half of this year. So maybe if in 2025 there's no real good games coming out, then maybe we could be disappointed. But Sony didn't have to add PCVR support, and they're doing it. And they're doing it just because it's going to move headsets. And that's borne out. And what you see on things like Reddit, I'm now more and more seeing, more than I ever had, people saying, I got a PSVR 2. I hear there's going to be PC support. Tell me some good PSVR 2 games to play. That's only going to motivate Sony to make more games or finance more games for PSVR 2, which it's in no way you look at this, are we really losing anything? We're only gaining things. So it's good. It's a win.
Except money. The issue with a lot, well, I would have to go through those games. The games you mentioned, I don't know how many of them are these games that, yeah, maybe they look good, but the developer's making them for all of the headsets. So to me, that's them making a smart business decision, not Sony being like, hey, make Behemoth on PSVR 2, please. It's not. I just looked at there. It's going to be on Quest. If it's not already on Quest, I don't. Sometimes the Quest ones come out and then we get it. It's hard to tell. I didn't do that much research, but I don't know. Right now, why would I purchase a PSVR 3 if they came out with it? Right now, I don't think I would. well, you would need to find a new host. The podcast would die because I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to buy their headset just so they can be like, guess what? You also go ahead and buy a freaking PC and you can have all the garbage games that people are still buying and creating for Quest to put on Steam. I'm not doing that. Either you support your own product that I will support you, or
which they have been doing. They're just not doing it through first party. They're doing it by financing third party support. But okay.
I mean, they did it some. Yeah, definitely. I agree. Resident Evils are awesome. But we've just talked about there's like maybe 15 good games and a bunch of crap. I like the PSVR 1 catalog better than the PSVR 2.
What is missing on the PS? Like what from Sony is missing on PSVR 1 that's missing on PSVR 2? Because the PSVR 1 catalog was, again, a lot of third party stuff happening. Maybe the only thing was the aim controller with the immersed company making Farpoint. Yeah. That's the only thing missing, right? That's a big investment. But now the Farpoint company seems to not exist anymore. Can't find a damn thing about them.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I mean, I know we had the Resident Evil on PSVR 1. We talked about some of that creativity, which, again, I guess you're right. Some of that is third party. It's not the same. I felt like they were exploring PSVR 1. They still supported it. They had a showcase entirely on PSVR 1. Like, it was obvious it was something. Something was there. And here it just seems like they don't care.
I don't get where they. I honestly don't get.
They bought a company. Now, it didn't work out. They bought Firewall Company. I can't even remember their name still. That in yourself shows, okay, well, they're serious. Now they get rid of them. The flagship, easily, I think, if you polled people, the best VR game on PSVR 1, Astrobot, doesn't even get a VR mode. I mean, I'm not saying a whole game. Give us a 2-hour experience or something. They don't even mention it. Like, it's one thing to be like, okay, this is our IP. It's the Mario killer for the whole company. And maybe this game, it's not going to have it, but you'll get something soon. They don't even mention VR, man. It's really like pulling teeth. It's just, it doesn't feel there. Like I said, I went by VR 3 right now. If it came out, I don't think
the pessimism is so confusing because you look at PSVR 1, we got Resident Evil, we got a neutered version of Gran Turismo. PSVR 2, we got 2 Resident Evils, arguably the best Resident Evils to come out in generations, and a full-fledged VR mode for Gran Turismo 7 at freaking launch, baby. And then we got a new IP with Horizon Call of Mountain, whatever. Then we get a finance game like Synapse coming out. It's amazing. It's as good as something like Super Hot in VR. We're still getting the regular third-party support that we saw in PSVR 1, so we're still seeing that weird experimentation stuff going on. And then on top of that, we're seeing, guess what? You now get PC VR support for no reason other than the fact that Sony's got goodwill for the PSVR 2 gamers. And then when everybody's saying this is Sony leaving the VR space, why would Sony then have a sale on PSVR 2 so they can sell more units? So if you think they're not interested in selling more headsets, why would they put a sale on it so that they would lose more money for every headset sold? And then they're adding games to PlayStation Plus, games that people care about, really good games added to PlayStation Plus for free if you got PlayStation Plus. And then you're also seeing things like demos for Legendary Tales and stuff like that. To me, it seems like Sony is, if Sony were really interested in pulling the plug and not supporting PSVR 2, we wouldn't see games added to PSVR Plus. We wouldn't see PC VR support added. Yeah, it sucks Astrobot's not in VR, but we're seeing more push in the direction of PSVR 2 than we've ever seen before on Sony with a VR system. So I don't know where this pessimism comes from, aside from the fact that people are just very sore, very raw, understandably, from the fact that Astrobot isn't in VR, which, if you follow the timeline of how Astrobot games get created by Team Asobi, it makes sense. They might lose money making a VR-only game. They're going to make a guaranteed bajillion dollars if they make it accessible to everybody. So I understand.
So they can't just pull the cord, because then again, they have to save face in some way.
Why? Why do they have to? If they're not going to make a PSVR 3, why do they have to?
Because they're gonna be like, oh, it's the PSP all over again, and no one's gonna trust them at all. They'll be like, oh, they're gonna come out with this thing, whether it's a new controller, whether this rumored new handheld, whatever they come out with that isn't a PlayStation main console, people are gonna be like, they're not gonna. It's gonna. I guess I can't say it's gonna be Google Stadia. They're gonna let it die, and that's not good for business. Also, the demos and stuff. If it's third parties doing that, I'm assuming there's probably some transaction of money going on or something. And headsets, if they've already made a bunch of them, they can't sell them. Well, getting something from them is better than not selling them at all, which seemingly is maybe what's happening. And so this adapter could help some of that, admittedly. So I don't see it. I don't other than you having access to more games, I don't know how you could feel positive about like Sony cares about VR. They'll even have a VR 3 and that they're going to become the market leader. I don't see how you say it. I don't see how you see it. But
Well, like Meta's VR division is losing money hand over fist, whereas I imagine the PlayStation VR, because Sony's probably pretty conservative with their finances, probably still a money maker, maybe just not the money maker they were hoping for. But when you look at other things, like they invested in like Foam Stars and Destruction. What's that Destruction game that came out? That free to play game that came out on PS5. Like those things are huge flops, much more huge than PSVR 2. Yeah, Destruction All Stars, right? So like Sony has we've seen what happens when Sony makes a bad decision and they ignore it and they pull the plug and move away. Destruction All Stars gets nothing, right? Foam Stars is going to be getting nothing here pretty soon. PSVR 2 still getting stuff, which leads me to believe that it's probably not the bajillion-dollar moneymaker they would hope it would be, but it's also probably not the abject failure that a lot of people seem to be claiming it is, especially because Sony's they're still paying it lip service in something like the State of Play. If Foam Stars or Destruction All Stars was doing good, you'd see DLC showcased in the State of Play. You're not seeing a damn thing because those things are failures. But this isn't a failure, and they wouldn't be wasting time showing Behemoth in a State of Play if they didn't think that there's something there that they can maybe inflate or make better. So I'm super optimistic. Adam, we're running out of time. We got to get through this stuff. Let's just talk about Battlezone a little bit, Adam. The big thing that stood out to me when the PC VR adapter came out was, guess what? PC VR has Battlezone. PSVR 1 had Battlezone. We love Battlezone. We want to play Battlezone, but it's not getting ported to PSVR 2. So our next best option is to buy Battlezone on Steam. And Adam, I bought you a code of Battlezone on Steam, so hopefully you can play it on your PC. I know damn well I'm going to be playing it on my PC. But Adam,
I'm not buying $1,000 PC just to play Battlezone.
Well, you got a PC already that can handle it. Adam, I got a Battlezone Steam code. And what I want to do is give that to one glorious, beautiful listener. So here's what we're going to do, Adam. I want the listeners to send in an email just letting us know they want to play Battlezone on their PSVR 2 on PCVR and just give us a reason why. Honestly, we're probably not going to get too many. I'm going to pick somebody at random by the time we have the next podcast. If you want Battlezone.
I will also buy a separate code and I'll give it to someone who has the best argument on why PSVR 2 being accessible on PCVR sucks. There.
All right, so we got two codes. Two codes given out, whether you want to go for Alex's code or Adam's code. You have your options there. But we will be giving that away.
I'll buy one for every person who talks trash about it. How about that?
I mean, it was just $2, right? We could buy a bunch of codes.
I don't even care. I'll drop $100 on this. F you, Sony. Dick.
He'll drop $100 on Battlezone codes for Steam, but he won't drop more than $20 on Townsman VR, which he claims to have loved based on the demo.
People that matter.
And that's what they did with the student loan forgiveness. Yeah. Adam is such a hypocrite here. Adam, we got like 2 minutes left. You think we could burn through some sales for our listeners?
No. I'm hot bothered. I'm going to go. I don't know what I'm going to do. I was going to play Townsman VR. No, I'm not going to. I'm sick. I have a pit in my stomach. We had a whole segment about why the PSVR 2 sucks and why Sony sucks.
Adam, what about Green Hill VR for $17.99?
Get that out of here. What a horrible price for a horrible game.
The game is probably great. It's probably fine, but like, man, play Song in the Smoke. That's like a way better version of the same exact game. Yeah. All right. Well, if you're done then, Adam, I mean, we got sales, but we can cover. I think they're probably going to expire here shortly anyways. So we'll do sales next time. But yeah, well, that's it for Play PSVR 2, the podcast, episode 150. Hope you enjoyed the reviews. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. Please send us an email at playpsvr@gmail.com. Are we doing that? Do we still have the
contact
PlayPSVR.com?
What an idiot. Oh my gosh.
Contact@PlayPSVR.com. Let us know, or leave a comment in the YouTube video here, letting us know why you should get a Battlezone Steam code. We want to play with you for sure. We want to give out as many as we can, but we just need you to let us know who you are. On top of that, go on iTunes, give us a 5-star rating, because you know this is the 5-star podcast you've always wanted. Go on YouTube, like and subscribe. Tell your dad. New twist here. It's Father's Day. Tell your dad there's a podcast out there talking about PSVR 2. Tell him soon he'll be able to play PSVR 2 on his PC like he's always wanted to. You can finally bond with your father over the glory of PSVR 2 headsets, and let him know we sent you at Play PSVR 2, the podcast, where virtual reality is our reality.
Blammo! Twist his nips.